Hey guys, my name is Paul, for those of you that haven't already watched the other videos on my channel, and for those of you that are familiar with the Myers Brigg typology indicator, I am an ISTJ, which means Introverted Sensing, Thinking, Judging. And some of you are probably already thinking in the comments, Paul, what the heck? We've seen these videos all over the internet. You're not telling us anything new. Or the other way around. You might be a close friend of mine and be like, Paul, there is no way you're an ISTJ. And to a certain extent, that's kind of true. Because no one fits their type 100% of the time. That'd be kind of boring. And plus, yes, I admit I've seen quite a lot of I am an ISTJ and here's why videos. So I decided that because there's just so much of that, and instead of repeating redundant information, I am going to do a different take. I'm going to talk about tertiary introverted feeling in an ISTJ. So, a tertiary function is basically that function that is, in the words of my friend, good enough, but it's still somewhat underdeveloped. It's usually not the go-to function that comes naturally for someone. It's more of, it's usually there, but not really. And I can give you a good metaphor here. That would be kind of like how Indiana Jones in the movies, he's really good with his fists and he's really good with a whip, but you may have noticed he doesn't really use his gun very much. But when he does it, it's surprisingly effective. It's just kind of primitive. And that's kind of the same way with, especially myself, with having tertiary introverted feeling. Because I used to think I was an ESTJ, because I can definitely appear outgoing and snappy. And some of you are probably thinking right now that I'm an extrovert because I seem to be talking kind of fast. But extroverted doesn't have anything to do with how fast you talk or how much you talk. It all depends on how you regain your energy. And right now, this is some serious introvert time for me. But, like I said, I'm here to talk about the feeling and why it's tertiary and not secondary. The reason why it's tertiary is often because, at least for me, my emotional expressions are often very primitive, or if I do have them, they're often tragically underused, I would say. See how I hesitated in giving that answer? Because it was a subjective matter. ISTJs are all about facts, and emotions aren't really something that are easy to describe. I mean, like, for instance, how do you describe being in love? You say, I feel as though I'm walking on the clouds, and I might say, well, that's great, but I've never walked on a cloud before, so how do I know how that feels? You know, something like that. Basically, those feelings, because they're introverted, they're inside our head most of the time. Feelings don't necessarily always have to do with emotions, though. They also have to do with values. So we have a very strong internal value system. But oftentimes, the way our values come across is through our extroverted thinking and our introverted sensing, which are respectively secondary and dominant functions for an ISTJ. We tend to rely on an external source of logic for making rational, objective decisions. Going by personal opinion isn't really something I like doing very much. Whether that's typical or not, I don't know. And the introverted sensing, of course, is the function that's all about facts and data. But on the other hand, feeling can also go hand in hand with that. When you combine introverted feeling with dominant introverted sensing, sometimes recalling concrete facts in our past makes us feel stuff. And so, as a result, we might make a decision that may seem odd to everyone else, and when they ask us to define it or express it, we might have difficulty in doing it. Like, people might say, so Paul, how does this make you feel? And I'll say, well, I suppose, it makes me feel like, and then I'll start making more of an objective statement, and it won't really describe the essence of like what's going on in my heart. Or in another instance, it might also make us reluctant to use emotional support. For instance, we might be talking to someone who's having a horrible day, And all they really need is just someone to listen to them and have a shoulder to cry on. But our natural instinct is to be the fixer-upper. We're known as the duty fulfillers on most sites. And we'll say, all right, so let's look at these solutions, which have been known to work in the past. So therefore, just pop in some medication, open up some books, you'll be fine. But sometimes people don't need that. Sometimes people need a shoulder to cry on. And we're sometimes reluctant to do that. But at least because it's tertiary introverted thinking and not inferior introverted feeling, sorry if I mix that up a bit, it's not like we're these total kind of jerks. No offense to ISTJs out there, but they're often very stereotypically portrayed in the media. They're often the types that are portrayed as being like tough, suck it up, paint us for wimps, we got work to do. Our type can kind of be like that to an extent, but because it's tertiary, we're more like, guys, we have a job to do, so you need to get back onto it. Or, yeah, I know, it's tough, but you gotta move on with life eventually. You can't just dwell on the sorrow. See how there's a little bit of a gentler tone there? So developing our introverted feeling to where it's not so primitive often involves us being willing to feel. Because at least for me, sometimes I over-rationalize my emotions and I say I shouldn't be feeling this, this is stupid, or this is petty. And I need to realize that emotions are a part of life. Also, ISTJs have a habit of, because they might consider emotions to be a waste of time, they sometimes bottle up their emotions, and then they'll just explode with emotion at the worst time possible. So one thing we need to take into consideration is to find that emotional outlet, to find at least one person we trust and vent it out to them in some way or another, or even just journaling. Although I might be the exception by introvert standards because I hate journaling, but hopefully at least one of you will also say that. Now, in terms of how does introverted feeling, or tertiary introverted feeling, work during stress? Well, when any Myers Brigg type is under stress, their function order tends to go in reverse. So in the case of an ISTJ like myself, when under stress, we'd all of a sudden use extroverted intuition as our dominant function, meaning we'd be envisioning all these different possibilities of the worst case scenario, and they seem to come out of like nowhere. The introverted feeling comes in when we take personal guilt in where things went wrong. Because extroverted feelers are all about others. Introverted feelers are, it's all about me kind of thing when it comes to our emotions. And so we'd be like, ugh, I screwed that up big time and it's all my fault, and yeah. If you've ever seen basically the movie Frozen, Elsa is a good example of an ISTJ that gets out of control. So I recommend giving that a try if you want to see tertiary introverted feeling when an ISTJ is under stress. So one thing we need to work on to improve our introverted feeling is to, first of all, make sure that our efforts are, we realize that we put a lot of work into our efforts. One of the biggest insults you can hurl at us is saying that we don't work hard enough. And believe it or not, we are just as strict on others as we are just as strict on ourselves as we are to others. So just as effortlessly as we might say, you really made a fool of yourself there, we say that about ourselves. We'll say, Paul, you screwed up big time there. You better straighten up your act. So don't ever take us for being hypocritical, because we'll find that quite insulting if we ever are hypocrites. So that's all I have to say on the topic of tertiary introverted feeling. I could say so much more about ISTJs in general, but that would make this video another 10 minutes, and that'd be kind of boring. So I plan on talking about Myers Brigg in a bit more depth in the future, but until then, hope you had a nice informative look at the lesser known side of an ISTJ. And hopefully if you get to know me in person, that can help you understand a few of my isms a bit more. And by me knowing Myers Brigg, that also helps me understand people a bit more. So the bottom line, whenever I talk about Myers Brigg, is that I always say this: it's a guideline, not a regulation. So don't treat it like it's the Bible, where it's an infallible source of authority. So that's that. And to keep it at precisely 10 minutes, enjoy yourselves, guys. Bye.